Call this meeting to order. It's April 6th. It's just past noon, and you are at the Stanislaus Council of Governments Executive Committee meeting. If you would, please go ahead and roll call.
Chair Condit,
Here.
Member Chiesa,
Here.
Vice Chair Carr,
Here.
Member Zwalin,
Here.
and Member Hernandez. Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Moving on in the agenda, we do have public comments. Members of the public may address the committee on any item not on the agenda. Comments shall be limited to 5 minutes. Any comments from the public about items not on the agenda? And none. Anything online? Moving to consent. Any executive committee member like to pull anything on the consent calendar? All right. Any member of the public that would like to make a comment on the consent calendar? Anything online? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll move that we accept the consent calendar as is.
I'll second.
I have a first and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving to discussion items. 5A, motion to recommend the policy board adopt resolution approving an amendment to the employee policies and procedures handbook. Monica.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the executive committee, Monica Streeter, and I'll be presenting this item. At the March 9th executive committee meeting, staff presented a proposed amendment to the employee handbook. One of the provisions that were proposed for revision, specifically pertaining to the provision of retiree healthcare benefits, was flagged as an item requiring further review and analysis, and we are no longer making a recommendation that that revision be changed. I'm just going to summarize what is contained in the handbook proposed for amendment, and this is consistent with what was presented last month. Reductions in force. The executive director has the ability to determine if a reduction in force is necessary and the manner in which it will be implemented, but when doing so, the executive director will consult with the policy board. We changed the vacation accrual cap for management employees. That cap has been reduced from 800 to 500 hours. Existing management employees will have until June 30th, 2028 to reduce their accrued balances to meet that new lowered cap. Employees hired or promoted to a management position after this is implemented will be subject to that 500-hour cap immediately upon promotion or upon their hiring. Cash conversion verification has also been revised. It's now limited to a maximum of 120 hours, one time per fiscal year, and it has to leave a minimum balance of 80 hours in the employee's vacation bank. Non-management employees have to have taken at least 1 week of vacation in order to request a cash conversion, and supervisory and management employees have to have used all of their management leave hours prior to requesting a cash conversion. Management leave hours are 90 hours, so that's approximately 2 weeks of time. Performance evaluations are now tied to the employee's anniversary of their hire date, so they will be conducted every 12 months. Salary increases will be based on merit. Special merit increases are permitted but will not exceed 5% of the employee's salary, won't be more than 1 time per year, and require written justification. If an employee is already at the top of their salary range, then they are not eligible for a special merit increase. For retirement health benefits, the language on the screen is what was proposed in the, or what is contained in the existing handbook. This was adopted by the board September of 2025, and this provides that the agency will provide 100% premium coverage of health, dental, and vision benefits if the employee has a minimum of 10 years of continuous StanCog employment, is at least 60 years of age, is employed at StanCog at the time of retirement and was employed by StanCog on or before November 17th, 2021. And this provision applies to a very small number of employees, 2 employees, if I recall correctly. At the March 9th Executive Committee meeting, an additional revision was identified that would have increased the scope of that retirement coverage to include all employees and would have become effective July 1st, 2026, where the agency would have paid full health benefits for individuals up to the age of 65. Next slide, please. We are now proposing that that provision be stricken. So what's in the proposed amendment before you retains the original language that was adopted by the board in September of 2025, but clearly strikes out that additional language that would have expanded the provision of retiree health benefits. The other revisions contained in the handbook are primarily administrative in nature. They're cleanup, typos, or they're revisions to be compliant with statutory leave laws. Example, leave for victims of violence has been updated to conform with the statute and things like that. So with that, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation, and I am happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Monica from the board?
How many sets of eyes have looked over this?
It was prepared by outside legal counsel, Newmiller and Beardsley, and internally, we've had at least 3 staff people who have gone through and reviewed it.
Because I read, and it's not above my pay grade, but we have caps at the county and they compare it against City of Modesto and or the county's caps on hours. Is that
We didn't specifically incorporate what the city and the county were doing, but we were trying to effectively reduce the cap because we do have employees who exceed the 500 hours. So to allow the transition and move the goalpost in the right direction.
okay, but does it need to be moved further? And this is something we're going to take up because I'm just asking what is generally acceptable. I guess I can figure it out.
I can take a look. I'm not recalling off the top of my head what the county or Modesto has, for example, for their caps.
Okay, or else it has to be considered a part of the compensation of the position if it's different than ours.
Okay.
When we look at overall compensation.
I'll make sure that I have that information as part of the presentation for the policy board.
Right. Oh, go ahead.
Can I ask one more question on the cash outs? It's not, the cash outs can occur at once a year,
Once a year, correct.
and is it at the discretion of the executive director, whether there's cash to do it?
It is subject to availability and approval by the executive director. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right. My question, one is on salary increases. How is it says salary increases will be based on merit. How is that measured?
So the handbook has a provision that talks about the performance evaluations, and the performance evaluations are conducted by the supervisor. The supervisor, based on that evaluation, has to make a recommendation to the executive director, and then the executive director has the ability to approve, deny, do something in between, has the discretion ultimately as to whether or not that's granted and at what rate.
Okay, so there is an evaluation process and form that's standard throughout the agency?
So the annual evaluations used to occur in the spring of every year for all employees. Now they are being tied to the hire date of the specific individual. So we're looking at a 12-month period for each individual. So they will occur throughout the course of the year, depending on when the employee was hired.
Okay, great. Excuse me. Under retirement health benefits, the date, the November 17th, 2021 date, is there any reason why that specific date was chosen?
That was the date that the handbook was presented to the policy board for adoption. Was
Okay.
November 17th, 2021.
Okay, great. Thank you. Then my last question is, Amber, are you okay with this? Or have you, and I'm fully aware that you're brand new and that you've had a limited amount of time, but that would probably be my question with every item going forward. And if, just how you feel about it.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate question. I haven't had an opportunity to fully, review every detail, but I trust, that this work has been ongoing and that this reflects, best management practices. So, and I'm definitely, moving forward, going to continue to work with staff on, evaluating whether our policies and procedures are all up to date. And as written here, it'll be a continual process of ensuring that we're, updating these as needed.
All right, thank you. That's it.
Any other questions? I'll go ahead and open it up for public comment. Any public comment on this agenda item? Anything online? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for a motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend that we, this goes to the policy board, correct? Yeah. Policy board adopt the resolution approving an amendment to the employee policies and procedures handbook at the next policy board meeting. Look at it.
I have a first.
I'll second that. I just want to make sure you get that information. I was trying to look it up just to make sure that the carryover caps are not too high. Okay,
I noted that and we'll make sure it's part of the presentation to the board.
thank you.
Okay, I have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Mr. Chair, for the record, I know Member Hernandez just walked in during this item. If we could clarify if you are voting on this item or abstaining. Thank you.
Right, moving on to 5B, motion to recommend the policy board adopt resolution approving the draft 2026 Measure L Rail Services Funding Guidelines. Jose.
Yes, good afternoon. Myself situated here. Well, maybe I'll just back up just a sec. So Measure L, we're familiar with it, but we might not be familiar with why my title takes a little while to load up. So the Measure L Rail Services is part of Measure L, the ordinance that was adopted by the voters or approved by the voters. Measure L doesn't just have money for road maintenance and rehab that goes to cities and counties, and it doesn't just have money for capital projects outlined in the measure. It also has money set aside for transit. Now, some of that transit goes directly to transit operators. There is a subsection under transit called rail services. That is what this item is about. It's about having guidelines for how to distribute the rail services funds in Measure L. This item has gone to other committees before this. It went to the TAC and the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee for comments. It went to the STAC and is now before this committee for a recommendation that the policy board approve a resolution to adopt the guidelines. At the end, I'm going to share what some of the comments have been from the other committees, but let's jump into what rail services is. Right out of the ordinance, this is what rail services is for. It's for operations, maintenance, and infrastructure improvements for public transit connections to existing rail services. Or another way of saying it, it's so that people can ride the bus to take the train. It's okay to supplement existing funds. In other words, it's okay if there's already some money for those buses to take people to trains. It's okay to add to it. Some services that are included in the measure would be ACE passenger rail, BART passenger rail, Amtrak passenger rail, and marketing to improve or increase the ridership. In fact, on the ridership, it says the money can be used for increasing ridership. It also says it can be used to fund new Amtrak service, which is confusing because the ordinance seems to say that it's for getting people to passenger rail service. And then it says to increase bus and van connections to existing ACE services. The ordinance is very clear, no funds may be used for high-speed rail. So the highlights of these draft guidelines is that we're planning on programming 4 million. That's more than I think it's more than we did last time. We haven't had a funding round since 2021-22. I'm committing to coming back in 2028, 2 years from now, and seeing if there's interest in doing another funding round. We are making changes to the scheduling requirements. There's the scheduling requirements. I'm making them both a little more aggressive and a little more flexible. We're also putting something that's straight out of the ordinance that if an agency does not end up spending these funds, that they need to be returned with the interest that was accrued in the bank. I made slight changes to the makeup of the scoring committee. It talked about large agencies and small agencies. We've moved away from describing our region as made up of large and small. Instead, we're specific about who's on the scoring committee. And then this language was added and people have commented on it, that the applicants provide information as to how they plan to sustain the proposed services without Measure L support. In other words, what if Measure L wasn't here for this anymore? This is the schedule. The highlights are that we would have applications due on June 30th, and that after we go through the approvals, the selection approval process, these projects could be ready to go in October. Now, before we go into questions, I just want to go over my notes. These are some of the comments that were made at the other committees. The STAC voted unanimously to recommend policy board approval with the following edits: that Stancog staff meet with Stan RTA and Turlock Transit to review and make edits to the selection criteria. In the selection criteria, there's 20 points that you can earn on safety. But the question is, why are we selecting based on safety? It's not in the ordinance. There doesn't seem to be a problem with safe connections to passenger rail. So we actually, I met with the two transit operators and they both agreed, and your staff agrees, safety does not need to be a scoring metric for this. Safety is important, but doesn't always need to factor into the points. We also met, the STAC also recommended removing the requirement that applicants provide information as to how they plan to sustain proposed services without Measure L support. And the premise is the reason the reason why this exists is, in theory, that we needed funding, a sustainable source of funding to get people on buses to passenger rail services. Measure L is around unless the voters get rid of it. They didn't think that should be a scoring criterion for the program. That said, it's still here and it's up for this committee to discuss. And then general comments we received were the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee wanted us to share more information about Measure L, which we will, and suggested that we provide illustrative examples of projects, such as what projects were funded in the last round. And I would bring that in the policy board recommendation to show what projects we funded the last time. And then they also asked that we further define what transit connections are. In other words, mass transit. And that is all. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you, Jose. Any questions for Jose?
It seems to me, Jose, that the only projects I can recall are the bus loop down in Denair and that we were subsidizing Turlock to drive out to Denair. I don't remember any other projects.
I think that was the only project from the last round. Is Turlock Transit gets people to and from it's called the Turlock Denair station for Amtrak.
Yeah.
Talking to Stan RTA, they also offer connections to ACE service. I'm sorry, to BART and ACE, maybe just BART. And they're interested in coming in for funding for those connections as well.
I think that's appropriate. I would be careful about operations if that anyone would be eligible for train operations. This money would be eligible.
Yeah.
I would agree that the buses that they pick up at the mall and they take the folks out, and I think there's another line that goes through Patterson, takes them to either ACE and or BART. That's perfectly appropriate. And anything to enhance stations, access to stations for people. I think that was the intent of it. I wouldn't try and get too far off of that. Just my thought. And what's the amount of money that's in the bank right now?
That's a good question. It's 4 something, like 4.3 million or 4.4. We are collecting in the range of around 800,000 a year into the program. So 2 years from now, should we come back, it would not be a $4 million funding round, but because it's been 5 years, we have a little over 4 million.
Perfect.
Yeah, one question. Going back on the safety requirement, is any of the Measure L funding going to be used for infrastructure improvement or development?
The way I read the ordinance, and as Director Chiesa just mentioned, it really sounds like this is meant for transit connections to passenger rail. I am not legal counsel, but if someone came in asking for capital improvements or operating assistance, we would bring it to legal counsel for further clarification. I'm prepared to market this as passenger transit service to passenger rail, and the ordinance does not mention anything about capital improvements.
Okay, because my concern would be that if we get off and running on ACE development coming into Modesto series, um, better, is that would be the requirement for the construction and improvements um, for the safety. And I'm thinking of A, the public, and B, the workers. So could that be where that's going?
Again, so, well, maybe not again. When we developed these guidelines, I'll say we, but it was me. I looked at the last guidelines. I figured they must have gone through a pretty, you know, a rigorous process. And so when I see scoring criteria, I think, oh, this scoring criteria has already been agreed to in our region. Let's go with it. But further clarification is what there doesn't seem to be a good reason for safety in there when you're offering operations connections to passenger rail.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Monica.
If I may, I just wanted to offer some clarification for Member Carr's question regarding infrastructure. And so for this particular component of the Measure L funding, it is allowed for operations, maintenance, and infrastructure improvements to provided that it's tied to public transit connection to existing rail services. But it's, again, it's very clear that it can't be used for high-speed rail, but it is intended to promote ACE and Amtrak, so rail modes of transportation.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for public comment. Any public comment on this agenda item? Anything online? Okay, I'll bring it back to the executive board for motion.
I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Moving to 5C, motion to recommend the policy board adopt resolution approving the draft 2027 Regional Active Transportation Program, ATP guidelines. Jose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I realized I didn't introduce myself fully in the last round. Jose Luis Cáceres, I'm your Director of Programming and Program Delivery. This is another funding round guidelines. In other words, we as a region are prepared to give out transportation funds, but before we do, we have to agree on the rules for how we're prioritizing projects for those funds. This is the draft 2027 Regional Active Transportation Program guidelines. Next slide is my job. This item similarly has gone to different committees. This one has gone to the Technical Advisory Committee and the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee for comment, consider information provided. And for action, it's coming before this committee, the Executive Committee, and the recommendation is that the committee recommend the policy board approve a resolution to adopt the guidelines. Let's do a little bit of review. We do this every 2 years, so this should seem a little familiar. There's 2 funding rounds that agencies in our regions can do for active transportation. Active transportation meaning bicycle pedestrian projects. There's a statewide round, which is 300 million this year. And then there's the regional, just for our region, Stanislaus, 3.7, let's just say 3.8 million. There's a lot more money in the statewide, so you'd think it'd be more open for competition, but no. Last round, there was $2 billion of transportation applications chasing the approximately 300 million. That's very competitive. Now, I'm very proud to say that StanCog, as an applicant, we were successful in getting funding for Church Street out in Empire in Stanislaus County, and I'm going to keep bragging about that year after year. We are not planning on applying for the statewide competition, but I believe some of our agencies are applying for the statewide. It is very difficult to secure statewide funding. Meanwhile, in the regional, even though it's a smaller pot, we're just competing amongst ourselves. Usually we get maybe half a dozen applications. So the odds are a little easier of getting the regional funds. But at the statewide, you can go and apply for $20 or $30 million for a bike bed project. At the regional, we couldn't even begin to pay the environmental for a $30 million bike bed project. I guess that would cover the environmental. Next slide is my job. So a little bit about the guidelines. We haven't been doing this the same way every year. I've been here for the last ATP funding round, but I wasn't here for the one before that. So numbering them, this is cycle 8. Last round was cycle 7, and the round before that was cycle 6. In cycle 6, StanCog chose a more hands-off approach. We told the CTC and we told our local agencies, if you want to apply for our region's ATP funds, go for it. Go apply to the CTC. Use their scoring rubric, have their scorers score your projects, and then whatever scores highest, that'll get funded out of our regional pot. And those regional projects only get selected after the state round. So if they didn't make it in the state pool, they'd still have a chance to compete in the regional pool. Well, there was some sort of issue. We didn't actually get enough projects applying for our regional share. So StanCog had to come in and do its own separate funding round with a new call for projects, new guidelines, and we selected projects, and I was not around for that. Then I came and we had a chance to revisit how we did our regional active transportation program. Now, I have a personal bias. I don't like how the CTC selects their projects. And I don't care that this is being recorded and that everyone knows. The CTC only has 2 reviewers to score projects. Now, if some of you have ever been on an interview panel or maybe a scoring panel for consultants, 2 reviewers is not very much, especially when the $300 million they're dealing with. I've conducted multiple funding rounds, multiple bike ped funding rounds before the ATP existed, and I would look at the scores by our scorers, the individual scores by score, and there'd be a lot of variance, if that's the right word, variance between scores. Some people might give a project a 70, some might give it a 75. Out of a dozen scores, you can get a pretty good average. But if you just picked your 2 scores out of at random, you could have a project that's in the middle scoring high middle or low middle, and it could vary quite a bit. So I proposed last round that we score our own projects, that we have a scoring group of about 7 to 8 people. And based on we would have triple the number of viewers, which is a larger survey sample. Anyway, so for this cycle, I'm proposing the same thing. We score our own projects. We don't give them to the CTC. I think we can pick our projects better. But I'll say this. I actually think the CTC is pretty good at picking what is the very best project. I think they're pretty good at scoring what's the very lowest project. For the 3.8 million that we have to program, it's entirely possible that the CTC could score our very best project as well as we could score our very best project. The question is, would they be good at picking our number 2 and number 3 projects as well as we might? Some highlights of these guidelines: scoring committee again of 7 to 8 members. Regional applications. Yes. Oh,
Why 7 or 8 members? Is it 7 or
It's-
8?
it's at least 7, and we can get 8 if I can get 2 StanCog staff people to review it. We are a little understaffed, and so not sure if we are going to be able to get a second StanCog reviewer for these. That's why.
Okay, I was just thinking it would be permanent positions
Oh,
that these people are picking or going through and scoring these projects. I mean, that's just what it seems like to me.
so the guidelines specify who the scorers must be. We must have someone from the city, someone from the city of Modesto, the county of Stanislaus, and then we go and get volunteers from the rest of the region to fill up the other 4 to get 6 members. And then we also will have a StanCog scorer. And if I can, I'd like to get a second StanCog scorer. Again, more scores, a better average,
Depending on who's available.
depending on who's available. And it happens sometimes where a scorer says they will score and then they're not able to do it. So we're aspiring for 7 to 8 members of the scoring committee. So back to it. So regional applicants must first apply to the state. And what this means is you're coming in for money from us. Let's say you have a platinum, like 100 out of 100 scoring project. Go get your funding from the state before coming up to our small pool of 3.8 million. So we require they go to the state first. We are not allowed to have identical scoring rubric as the state. So we add another 5 points in for consistency and inclusion in the regional transportation plan. Everyone can get these 5 points. And then this is where I like to say this is not a good place to get funding for an active transportation plan. The most that we can give out for a plan is $75,000. It costs a good $15,000 just to apply for ATP. This is not a very cost-effective way to get planning funds. Not going to go over all these dates, but the call for projects already went out from the CTC, and their deadline is June 22nd. And our local agencies know this. StanCog, we would get our guidelines approved by the CTC also in June 25, 26 at the CTC meeting. We would turn around and issue a call for projects immediately and give everyone 3 months. Now, what's nice is our application, it's the same as the CTC's, except that there's 5 points more you can get. The CTC would be releasing its recommendations, and right around that same time, we'd be releasing our recommendations to the policy board. This whole thing gets approved by the policy board at the December meeting, but the whole funding package does not get approved until the June 2027 CTC meeting. And with that, I have any questions. Oh, I did note comments. Most of my comments are just from the Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, and they wanted more information. Not to make a decision, I'll be specific. They're suggesting for the scoring committee, put that in a table so that we can see more clearly who would be on the scoring committee. And then for the selection guidelines, talk about the benefits of ATP. Don't just talk about how you're going to score projects. And they also, they want to see us describe that there's benefits to the motorized public, the driving public. When someone hits someone on a bicycle, it causes damage to the motorists too, in terms of their health and mental health. It's no fun hitting a pedestrian, is what they basically are wanting to get included in the guidelines.
Thank you, Jose. Any questions for Jose? Go ahead.
So can I go back to the timeline? So people can apply to the state comes out with their list. Is it on the 2/19 of 27? Is that? I guess my question is, you apply and people that get funded through the CTC, I'm assuming they're going to be people that apply for both, right?
Yes.
And then they get taken off the StanCog list.
Yes. If they're funded through the CTC, then we don't need to fund them.
What happens if they get 90% funding and they come for 10% from the StanCog?
That is a good question. Our advice, it's their decision. They're the lead agency. Our advice is take your 90% and wait and see if the CTC can make you whole. That's what happened with Church Street. Last time, I think we got maybe 55 or 60% of our funding, and we waited. And then within about a year and a half, the CTC deleted some projects from the active transportation program that didn't deliver, and they were able to give us that money. So you always want to say yes. Maybe not always. If they give you 10% of your need, maybe you say no. But you want to try to say yes even to 90%. Our guidelines don't specify that we will come in and fund the rest of it. So I guess if the sponsor was adamant that StanCog come in and fund it, I guess that's something for your staff to negotiate, and we would come back to the policy board. It's entirely possible that they might not need very much, and we might have not very much for them.
But their chances of being successful if they don't ask for 100% of a project cost.
There's no cost effectiveness calculation. In fact, most or many applicants apply for 100% of the project cost. Maybe I'm misunderstanding your question.
No, there is no. So if there's a match, a local match of $1 million, they don't get scored up at CTC.
No, their rubric, and anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but their rubric is about safety and connectivity and lots of things, but not about whether a project is expensive or whether they're bringing enough local match. I think they didn't want. Oh, I see a comment.
With the leveraging, I mean, they score on that.
You know what? Maybe my better answer is to say I don't know. And
I think we were successful with an ATP grant for Denair because we had match.
Okay.
Denair sidewalk project. So I'm not sure that's correct, but
Okay.
neither here nor there. That's what would make me think, again, if it's the way I think and it's not based on a whole bunch of fact, but applications might ask for only a percentage, score higher at CTC, and then come back to this pool of money. And we should make a determination whether if you get funded through the CTC, even if you're not made whole, it's what you ask for. If you get what you ask for, that should be the end of it. I would think. Does that make sense? if you only ask for 500,000 of $1 million project and they give you all 500,000, now if they only give you 400,000 or 300,000, then this is a potential funding source. Am I making sense, Amber?
Go ahead.
So if I would paraphrase it, I heard it a couple different ways. One is if you get 100% of what you requested, then you shouldn't come back to the region for a second bite at the apple. The other one is if you didn't get 100% of what you requested, should you be able to come back to the region and ask for the rest of the bite of the apple? And I think I heard the first one, I think I heard loud and clear. The second one, I wasn't sure if that's also what you meant, or if you had
I
an
think
opinion on the second
that was
one.
a fair assessment.
So well, I'll leave it to the committee.
It seems to me that we have bike ped monies that we could match with locally with Measure L. And we've done that in the past on projects. And again, we got what we had asked for, but we had a local match. And we're responsible for any of the overage, cost of construction index increase. I think that's fair. You should ask for what you think you could complete the project with from the CTC. And then if they don't give you what you asked for, then it's and I think there's a different conversation.
Go ahead.
I have a question that just seems like something like generally over the decades of public service that, is there someone that cities can go to, like that, somebody that would know, like, this is like the perfect project for this situation, say in Riverbank, or like, this is the perfect project for, because it's not a lot of money. So for the city of Modesto, when a lot of times our projects are just these massively costly projects, but is there someone that kind of tracks that could say, this would be ideal to apply for without, I mean, I understand you can't show bias because it's the same people that are like making the decision in the end, but I'm sure there's somebody that would know, like, this would be so great for Houston or for this block in Newman or whatever it is that would, make it be successful so that we get every single penny that we should.
So I have 3 locations, 3 sources. And I want to talk about the bias also at the end. So the CTC on its website, if you go to, if the sponsor goes to ATP, they'll find out about something called the ATP Resource Center. And these are folks funded by this funding program tasked with helping local agencies discuss and identify their best projects.
Do the cities know that?
Do not know, except that brings me to my second point. The last time around, we, along with, you remember Blake Dunford, we did heavy outreach to our region where we had a 2-day workshop in this room, presided over by CTC, where they went over past applications and how we've done, and they went over the guidelines and the options available to them. So 2 years ago, our agencies knew a lot about this. It's possible they've had a turnover in staff. Second, the CTC always offers to do either tours, virtual tours or real tours and office hours. And they've offered that. But now that the call for projects is open, they're not doing that for this funding round. Third is I ride my bike and I have some bike ped planning. Your own staff here is maybe not super qualified, but we're qualified to go out and visit. And finally, about bias. Only 1 or 2 StanCog members of staff will be scoring projects. It'll be a scoring committee of folks made up of the region. And we all want our projects funded in this region.
Sure, yeah, and I wasn't trying to make it assume that there would be bias at all. It's just that we need accessible help for people, and not just help, but like proactive. Like I always feel like with cities, they're limited with the capacity to follow these things super closely sometimes, and it would be really, really helpful. Sounds like you do an amazing job and are willing to do that, but if, we can have our antennas up to really clue cities in so that we do take advantage of these in the best place possible.
Yeah, and I think Jose Luis, himself tracks and keeps up to date with funding programs, and we make those, the TAC aware of those as they come up. But I would just offer too, that's the value of the COG. in developing the regional transportation plan and making sure our local projects and priorities are in the regional transportation plan, because then we as COG staff are tracking those projects and discussing with the local jurisdictions on funding strategies for those priority projects. And then other things we can do is in our OWP, do plans to help develop those projects and prepare them for funding. So like a regional-wide active transportation plan. And then we can identify, those priority projects and then start sketching out, again, funding strategy and watching out for our local jurisdictions and saying, hey, this Safe Streets for All grant program is out and this would be great for your X project.
That sounds great, how we have our priority projects, our big 8 that we talk about over and over and over, which are obviously huge and important, but really good, sounds like a good idea for these items also, and would be super helpful, I would think, to cities when they're looking to do these areas that really make a huge impact in a neighborhood or children walking to school or whatever the situation is. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'm going to open it up to public. Any public comment on this agenda item? Anything online? Okay, I'll bring it back to the executive board for motion.
I'll make the motion
I have a first.
to, recommend that the policy board adopt this resolution by draft 2027 Regional Active Transportation Program Guidelines.
So I just want you to know if it comes out in this form without those couple of changes, I'm gonna vote against it, but I'll just bring it up again at the COG, and whether, so.
That they should be able to come back to the ATP. If they're only funded at 90% CTC, then they can come back to
Yes,
the
of
regional
what they asked
ATP
for,
to ask.
but they needed to be able to complete the project. I think that's pretty important. And I digress. It was not the state that had the match requirement. It was a COG. The COG scored. So it was out of the $3 million. The last time we had a call for projects, the Denair project, we had a match. And so I don't know if those were our own internal rules or if they were CTC rules that we adopted, but it was local. So.
So Jose Luis, do you understand the direction in terms of the additional change? So will that be a priority? Is that what we're stating?
No, I don't want to speak for anyone else. We'll see how the motion goes, but I wanted everyone.
You want to amend that?
I will withdraw my motion, and if someone else wants to make a motion to address that understands it more thoroughly, they can do that.
Okay, I'll give it a quick whirl, if that's okay. I'd like to make a motion to adopt this plan with the change that if someone applies for the CTC ATP project and they're fully funded, that they can't come back to the StanCogs for a second bite at the apple. If the CTC does not fully fund them of their request, then they can come back to the COG, just with that one change.
Is that the new motion?
That's our motion on the floor.
I will second the motion with the corrections.
I have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right. Yeah. All right, moving to item D. Motion to recommend the policy board adopt resolution approving the fiscal year 2025-26 overall work program, the OWP, amendment 2. Jean Fletta.
Good afternoon, Chair and Executive Committee members. Jean Fletta, Deputy Director of Operations. Sorry, getting used to this new clicker. Okay, so the overall work program is a required document that we must submit and get approved each year by StanCog's funding partners, which include FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration, FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, and Caltrans. It's a management tool which identifies tasks and products that StanCog will undertake each fiscal year. This amendment is necessary to include Caltrans carryovers and the reconciliations for FY24 and 25. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24. 24 Okay, Schedule 1 is the operating and project revenue for the OWP for the federal, state, and local funds. The first column for the schedule show the FY 2025-2026 Amendment Number 1. The second column is this Amendment Number 2, and the third column is the increase or decrease between the two. Finally, is room for notes in the far right-hand side of the schedules. Program carryovers from 2023-24 and to 24-25 are critical to move forward through StanCog's process, as funds must be programmed by May 8th in order not to lose any funds. We also want to point out here that there is no Measure L 1% being taken from this budget, that those monies have been frozen. Okay, operating expenditures budget. You can see here that the budget for the services and supplies such as travel, postage, structure, maintenance, and the rent, supplies and such have all increased by approximately $766,000. And this is due primarily to the loss of staff and follow-up from the grand jury investigation. And what I mean by that is when we lost staff, we've gotten temps in to help us as needed. And we had some mandates made by the grand jury that we had to take care of as part of why these costs went up in this particular section. So projects expenditure budget. This is your plans, like Amber was talking about a little bit earlier. Your regional transportation plan, your area rideshare plan, your project expenditure budget, which remains relatively flat. So these are the plans. The RTP is the biggest one that we do all year, and that is the regional transport. Or we do every few years, and that is the one that we were just talking about. As I said, these remain relatively flat. Our big projects are coming to conclusion, and so the money is starting to flatten out a bit. Schedule 4, this is your capital project expenditure budget. This is really your Highway 132 budget, capital budget. So look at there. On February 4th, we took this item to the Management and Finance Committee after meetings. The staff found omissions on revenues which have been corrected. On March 4th, we brought this back to the Management and Finance Committee, but the link was not active. So then we took this item back a third time on April 1st to the Management and Finance for a motion to recommend the Policy Board adopt the FY 25-26 Amendment Number 2. We have received initial comments from Caltrans, and we are making those modifications in coordination with Caltrans. We've also received the other day, when we brought this to Management and Finance Committee, some public comment and comments from local jurisdictions, and we're making modifications to those as well. They're not showing up in what we have for you today. We just simply didn't have enough time, but they will show up in the final Amendment 2 that we end up taking to Caltrans per Caltrans directions. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions.
All right. Any questions for Jean? Mayor?
I have a question. You mentioned that the modifications that were recommended will be going to Caltrans, but will they be coming back to this policy board?
This one is supposed to go through, if we can get it to go through, so that we don't have any hang up programming our funding. So it needs to go through before May. So this one would not, no.
Okay, so what we're approving, what we would approve today Is it going to come to the poli- will
Oh,
come
it
to the
comes to the policy board,
meeting,
yes.
correct?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
And will the
Yeah.
modifications be in there at that point?
Yes, we should be able to make the modifications
Okay.
by then. Yes,
So we're just approving, possibly approving today, this as is, but then there'll be modifications prior to the policy board meeting,
correct.
prior to this going to Caltrans. All right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? You know, you look, yeah. Kind of reaching.
Yeah, I think, the Management Finance Committee approved the item conditionally that we address the modifications identified in the public comment as well as Caltrans review and comments. So, I don't know that you want to approve and recommend exactly what's in here because we still are making and addressing Caltrans comments in changes. So I don't know if you do the same where you recommend with conditionally with the modifications.
Yeah, those are my questions.
Go ahead. Good. All right, I'm going to open it up to public comment. Anyone like to make public comment on this agenda item? Anything online? Okay, I'll bring it back to the executive board for further comments and or motion.
All right, I will motion that we recommend that this goes forward with the modifications prior, that this policy board will see prior to our policy board meeting on April 15th.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I've got a first and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moving to E, fiscal year 2026-27 operating and Measure L budgets.
Thank you again. So this one is, I'm not going to go over the first slide, and you will also find in front of you an errata memo that was placed at each of your seats before you sat down this afternoon. And that's what I'm going to be going over this afternoon. So initially, we were going to just do this verbally, but I think that having a PowerPoint presentation is going to be a little bit more helpful to see the picture that we want to show to you. So you'll remember a while back, we were talking about that the COG has a OWP, but we don't have a budget, a normal, if you will call it that, a normal budget. And so one of the things that our former interim executive director wanted to do was to have a formal budget that they could bring to you all to see, and that's what this is going to be. There'll be a budget workshop about this item prior to the board meeting on the 15th, and then we'll be discussing this during the board meeting as well. So like the OWP, I won't go into the items that it says on that screen because they are the same. So we'll go to the next slide. This slide shows the revenue projections and the sources. You can see here that the federal revenue is 65% of the revenues that we get. Next, and it has there the type of revenues for each of the revenues sections. You have the state at 20% and local at 15%. And so FHWA and FTA are two big funders of what we do. Then you have the programming and planning expenses. And this shows you your programming and planning expenses. You'll see REAP there. We have REAP 2.0, which is this is the second time we've had REAP. We had REAP 1.0. This is now called REAP 2.0. This is not something that we anticipate having year after year after year. We recommend that at the end of this cycle, that'll be the end of REAP altogether. And REAP is done through HCD. You see the RTP support at 15%, ride share at 22%, and so on. Excuse me. So how do we get our funding? Part of our funding is calculated for the overall cost to house and support for employees who are reimbursable. That means management, planning, programming, and engineering staff that are typically working on a project like the OWP or the RTP. What we do is we code our time to those programs. Other member of staff, while no less essential, including finance, accounting, and procurement, aren't necessarily able to code as much time to each of these what we call work elements, and will code their time towards administration. We have the agency's reserves are generated by capturing those indirect funds. It takes years to accumulate significant amounts of reserves. The recent years, reserves have been drawn down to fund extraordinary non-reimbursable expenses. You'll remember vacation cash outs, non-reimbursable travel expenses, and then the acquisition of 1407 I Street. The combined impact of that is approximately $4 million. So what are some of the challenges and what are some of the challenges, issues, and solutions? And again, we'll be going over this in detail at the board workshop and at the next policy board meeting. Near-term solution or challenge is to restore our reserves. A near-term solution is to suspend non-reimbursable expenses, so things that we cannot get money back for. Those include state and federal advocacy, and then filling non-reimbursable staff positions. We could increase our membership dues if we needed to do that, or that's an option. They're very low right now. We could update our cost allocation plan, which is the ICAP, which I read off just a little bit ago. And then a longer term solution is to sell or to consider selling the I Street property at 1407. In the short term, there's a bridge loan that is needed to address cash flow. We wanted to bring you a full perspective on that loan, which we plan to do at a later time. We just don't have all the information at this point to bring that to you in a position where we feel comfortable. So key strategies for right now. Staff up for the Director of Programming of Engineering and Planning. That sounds counterintuitive, but again, that's where you bring in the money, the indirect costs. Those three positions program pretty much 99% of their time towards something that we can get money back for. Update systems to improve oversight and fund management, and then identify competitive grant revenues for plans and projects. So next steps. Well, we're here today talking about this. We plan to take this back to the policy board meeting on the 15th at 4 o'clock. That would be for the workshop. Then we'll have the meeting at 6. And May 6th, Management and Finance will have a final budget review. And then on May 11th, we'll execute a committee motion to recommend the policy board adopt the FY 26-27 budget and overall work program. And May 20th, policy board adopt by motion the 26-27 budget and overall work plan. And that concludes the report for today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Questions for Jean?
There are so many questions. So we're going to hear this at 4 o'clock, and we're expected to vote on it at 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, right? We're going to get a 2-hour, that's it for all the board members.
I'll just clarify that the workshop is just an informational workshop, and then we'll develop the draft budget that will then go back to the policy board in
May.
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 Yes. So then a draft will go to May for your approval, and then a final in June.
But the numbers that we have here, the 26, 27, those are just preliminary.
Correct.
So they're due to change, the same thing contingent upon us closing our books for 23, 24, 24, 25.
Correct.
That's
Yeah,
it.
we're waiting. The thing that's really holding us up right now is our audit for 23, 24. Go ahead.
I guess the quick question is then, why would we need a bridge loan if this is the first time I've ever heard this. That's number one. Number two is we should just put the building up for sale, period. Just simple as that. It should have a for sale sign on it tomorrow. If that's the situation, because taking a loan makes no sense to me. Did we miss any reimbursements? I guess I just asked that globally, but reimbursements that they were time sensitive that have passed that we can't recoup?
No.
Not to your knowledge. Okay. Because I sat down with Amber last week. Welcome to the situation. But I think through in my mind, what are the things that are important for us? And the non-reimbursable, it makes sense to me. And in my conversation, if we get rid of advocacy altogether, we're already in the spiral right now that we can't stop. We literally have been so successful in the past for bringing money into our jurisdiction. And if we don't have anyone helping us, just what you were talking about on ATP and other projects, if there's no one advocating for us and you think that we're smart enough to go up and convince the CTC ourselves as elected officials, I mean, we help, but you got to be up there all the time working on behalf of us. I think it's like a death spiral for this organization. I really do. And I don't know if we can afford it, but I don't know how we can afford it. And this, what it sounds like to me today, and had a preview a little bit, but the bridge loan I've never heard anything about until just now. So this reminds me of 2009-10, when you would cut $1 knowing it's going to cost you $1.25 or $1.50. And because we have the building, we would be crazy literally not to get rid of it, regardless of what we got for it. I mean, you try and sell it, but taking a loan is just like a non-starter for me, a bridge loan. It doesn't make any sense. But those are just thoughts that are coming to me right now.
My question is, in the addendum, the memo, it says on page 4 at the top, StanCog reserves. It says the agency's reserves are generated by capturing indirect costs. Would you explain to me what exactly indirect costs means?
Yeah, so the indirect costs are the costs that we can, when we're working and we're working on something that we can bill to, like the regional transportation plan. That's that would be an example of an indirect cost, so that we can get money back for it.
Can I just clarify a correction?
Mhm.
So direct costs are costs that are associated directly to work being done on an actual project, where that's very clear, okay? A planner is doing work on a project. Indirect costs capture and cover those overhead costs, administrative costs that might not be directly associated with a project. And so that's why the agency develops an indirect cost allocation plan with Caltrans, where you actually have to go through a pretty cumbersome process to identify your rate that you can bill and charge to Caltrans. So that's something I believe the agency is working on
We're
developing, so we can capture more indirect costs. Because if we go with the state rate of, I think it's 10%, that's really low. And you're not able to then capture and invoice, for your administrative overhead costs.
Okay, so what it sounds to me like, I'm kind of trying to look at this as an overall picture here of what's happened previously through the decades. How do you generate reserves in this organization?
Indirect costs.
But it sounds to me like every penny really has to be accountable for a particular job or item.
that's why it takes so long to generate any money, is because it's off of the indirect costs.
It's never been clear to me how, like, money to buy a building or where that comes from. So I guess down the road, maybe, we can have a clearer understanding of that, but going forward, and this would be more my comment period, would be the importance of accounting for every penny. I've just never been able to understand clearly where the reserves and the money comes from. So I'll just leave it at that, but that will, I'm sure, come up again at the workshop.
Yeah, and I can't dig into that now because I
Sure.
don't know the history of that, but I think it will be important for this agency to establish a reserve fund policy so that it's very clear and it's legal, how we're generating our reserves and what we're capturing, how we're funding that. I'd say on the building and items like that, I mean, that's funded through when you develop your budget, and it's very clear when you're doing capital purchases where that funding is coming from. So it's not necessarily, if you're purchasing something, that's not necessarily from your reserves, that's you're identifying funding, for it, and it's very clear. And that's, a purpose and a benefit of pulling out your budget out of your OWP, so it's very clear our operations and capital expenditures and what we're funding.
Okay, did we have a column for that, for capital punishments? Freudian slip.
Can you restate your question?
Did we have a spot for capital purchases and,
Yes, that's on Schedule 4. That's mostly the Schedule 3, I'm sorry, is your operating contracts.
all right. Where is that? On Schedule 3. I think for the purposes of this meeting, we'll just move on. But we'll, in the workshop, and I might add, this is not the first time I've asked this over the years. It's been an ongoing question. So we'll just move on, and at the workshop, hear more about it.
All right, any other questions? I would just have to make the comments as Vito, if we're needing a bridge loan, we need to hyper sell that building. Sorry, I'm getting yelled at back there. We need to move quickly. If we're looking at a bridge loan, we need to move very quickly in selling that building so that we don't have to do that. I don't know, we may be behind the 8 ball and having to do that anyway. We all knew it was coming. I didn't think as bad as needing a bridge loan, but we knew that at some point this was going to be staring at us in the eyes. So we need to be proactive and doing those types of things and getting that building on.
The other thing is the $4 million total. The building was 2.3. We put a little more into it. That means cash outs, vacation cash outs and other things were $1.6 million, which again is another figure that is like beyond my comprehension, because that does not include the extraordinary cost, does it? The attorneys and for the
Investigations and
investigations. Yep. Is that a part of the 4 million?
So there was 766,000 that was for the attorneys. We're not done paying the attorneys either, so this is still going on. But for what we've captured for right now, it was 766,000 for the attorneys and the things associated with the grand jury. As far as the payments for the vacation cash outs, those were very significant. I don't have the figure up in front of me right now, but they were up into like the $400,000 or $500,000 range.
And just to clarify, if I can, those vacation cash outs were payments that had to be made for employees who'd been with the organization for a long time and then separated from the organization. It wasn't employees just coming in and asking for a cash conversion of
Yes,
vacation. That was what the
absolutely.
largest component was, because we had 3 longstanding employees who separated.
Absolutely, yes.
and they were corrected.
Jen, did you have anything to add?
Yes, the building purchase was 2.7 million, not 2.3.
Okay. I mean, I would like to not potentially get hung up on these numbers. I myself haven't been able to evaluate it. I know interim director or previous interim director, Kate Miller, when she comes back, we'll be working on this item together. And as staff had mentioned, alluded to, we still haven't closed books for 2 fiscal years from 23-24 to 24-25. And so we really don't know what that number is. So I think it's premature to be, I think, discussing in detail that at this moment.
Any other questions? All right, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to public comment, and I do have one public comment card. Karen?
Good afternoon, members of the Executive Committee. My name is Karen Dunger, and I was the Manager of Financial Services for StanCog for 11 years, and my career ended here in February of 2023. So in listening to some of your comments, I can answer a couple of your questions if you don't mind me taking a moment to do that. Your indirect cost plan is something that StanCog had the entire time I worked here. Every year, there's an indirect cost plan that is calculated based on a formula, and it is a very cumbersome process. Amber was right in stating that goes to Caltrans, and it has to be approved by their audits and investigations. When you do not have an ICAP, then in order to cover all of your overhead costs, not just your cash outs, but your overhead costs, those costs come directly out of StanCog's reserves. The reserve balance that StanCog had accumulated was a series of many, many years of just having a little extra TDA money or whatever other funding source that they had that perhaps didn't have funds that were fully expended. So when I left, in February of 2023, the reserves were at $3.8 million. And I can't tell you any more about what they would be at now either. I don't know those numbers. I'm just telling you where they were when I left. This particular item that's coming to your board for future conversations, I guess, next week. One thing I would like to tell you is this first slide was wrong, where it says historically StanCog has not had a line item budget. That is absolutely incorrect. StanCog always has a line item budget. It's just that when you have passed it in the past, it has gone with the overall work program in tandem. And that's because Table A of the overall work program drives the revenues for what you use in your budget on your revenue schedules. So you can separate those items. They very well can be taken as separate items. I agree that the OWP is not the budget for the agency. However, the line item budget, which Jean presented when she was discussing the amendment earlier, does show that that is the line item budget. That's the same format that we've used for years. Whenever I was working here and we presented the line item budget to this policy board, they just took it as a one-off, one resolution, but for two things. So it would always say the overall work program and the line item budget. So they would just make one resolution for the two documents to go together. Now, the other thing that she brought up, there was a Measure L schedule that was attached to this same document for the staff report, and it's showing a Measure L budget. That is not a budget. That is a projection of your Measure L revenue. The Measure L budget that I believe MFC has been asking for is related to the costs associated to how StanCog administers these funds and the costs that they were proposing that would go forward for this additional 1%. Those are the things I've heard when I've listened to these meetings. This item that they're representing as a budget would in fact make a budget for Measure L where one is not necessary. You already have Measure L policies and procedures, you have a Measure L strategic plan, and you have an ordinance that are all mandating how this money gets distributed by StanCog. This is not an allocation. These are not appropriations like you find with your TDA money. This is completely different. And if you make this, if you adopt a budget, then should your revenues exceed what is in this proposed amount, in order for StanCog to administer these funds, you would have to bring back an amendment to this budget to the policy board for those additional funds. Problem with that is by the ordinance, you have a set amount of time in which these funds are supposed to be paid once StanCog has received them. And if they have to come back to the policy board for an additional amendment, you would not be paying those out in the time frame mandated by your ordinance. So those are my comments, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you for being here. Any other public comment on this agenda item? Anything online? Yeah, I'll bring it back for further comments. This is a no action item.
I do want to ask on the accrued liabilities of cash outs, were we carrying any liability on the books at all? Was there a?
We don't have the finalized number right now. We're almost completed with the audit.
No. Have we been through the audit process in the past? Have we been accruing the liability of the cash outs, the people who are carrying hours? Do we have a liability set aside on the
No.
balance sheet? We have not.
No.
All right, any other further comments or questions? Okay, moving on to item F, motion to recommend the policy board approve the professional service agreement for Karen Dunger, Consultancy, LLC. Jean Fletta.
Hi, yes. So you just met Karen Dunger, and you can hear that she has a lot of experience in working here at StanCog. And as you know, we've been struggling with finance staff, in particular, bringing in finance staff that knows how to do the work that we do, because what we do here isn't like what you'll find anywhere else. So throughout the last couple of weeks, Karen has been coming in and she's been talking to us, and we've been talking to her. And we asked her the other day if she would be interested in coming in and helping us and helping our staff by essentially training the staff using her 11 years of experience with some of these things and some of the stuff that we've been talking about today. So in front of you is a proposal for Ms. Dunger to come on board with us to bill at a rate of $250 per hour, not to exceed $50,000. The term of the agreement would be April 15th, 2026 to April 16th, 2027. I do want to say that this has not been brought to the Management and Finance Committee, although we had good comments from them regarding Ms. Dunker. But the last policy board, there was some say that that we have to have these agreements go through that group. This is one of those things where it's really a good time to have that extra pair of eyes, set of eyes, and set of knowledge, the knowledge base that she has on board to help us as we really do need it. So this is up for your consideration today.
Thank you, Jean. Questions?
Just one question.
Go ahead,
Okay.
Mayor.
When was Karen Dunger Consultancy LLC established? All right, thank you. That answers my question.
And if it wasn't picked up, it was established last week, if I heard that correctly.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Go ahead, Vito. You're leaning
So-
to your microphone.
I can vouch for Karen and her ability. We just had this conversation, I think, when we were meeting, how I said you should be willing to ask Karen questions. I always question the amount of money because I'm guessing that's like 3 or 4 times what you're making. But again, I have to sit and I'm okay pushing this forward to the board, but I know there's going to be a lot of challenges at the board at that cost. I'm just being realistic. But the knowledge base, there's no questioning Karen's knowledge base and how helpful she could be.
Go ahead,
I
Rich.
I had those thoughts too, but as noted here in the staff report, she is highly respected by management and finance, so hopefully that's helpful. And separate from that, because I do want to move this forward, maybe what could help is having the timeline of the hiring process, and what that looks like along with presenting this item and give some long-term solution too.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, I really appreciate those comments, and I agree, this is kind of not only a gap fill effort, but also the urgency of getting her the help on the OWP. I think that's the most critical item that we need assistance with immediately to correct some of the key major issues that have been identified with the OWP, and training our staff up so that they can continue to do that work. So the idea is not for her to, continue to do the work or to come do the work. It's to train our staff and develop the, tools and the templates that they need to do it correctly.
Anything further, Ray? All right, I'm going to go ahead and open this up for public comment. Any
Yes.
public?
Mr. Chair, we do have a public comment from Carolyn Newman virtually.
Okay, any public comment for public that are here in person? All right, now we'll go online.
Hi, thank you. My name's Carolyn Newman, and just for full disclosure, I was on the 24-25 civil grand jury. I think especially in light of the new executive director getting settled in with all of this tumult and turmoil, having the expertise of Karen Dunger to reestablish the baselines that were working best prior to her departure is really what's best for the organization. And even at $250 an hour, I would say she's going to cut down her ability to train your staff to do what they need to do is going to cut down a lot of use of consultants going forward in the future much more immediately. And I think ultimately it's a short-term expenditure now that will have a lot of long-term gains. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Thank you.
Any other online comments? Okay, I'll bring it back to the policy board for either further questions, comments, and motion.
I'll make a motion to recommend the policy board adopt a resolution approving the professional services agreement for Karen Dunger Consultancy LLC.
I'll second it.
And all transparency, I had cataract surgery last Wednesday, and I'm having the other eye done Wednesday, so I'm doing, or in 2 days, so I'm doing the best I can.
You're doing
under the
great.
circumstances here. Thank you.
Okay, I have a first and a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. All right, moving on to G, draft April Policy Board agenda. And I know Shannon's not in the room, so
I'll take it.
you got it, Jean?
Yeah.
Okay.
So you do have the draft policy board packet in front of you. Just wanted to see if there's anything that you wanted changed or any additions. We will be adding Karen Dunker's contract on here. We didn't have that before, but we will be adding that on.
I have a quick question. I was gonna say for my comments, but do we plant the seed with adding an information item on the JPA? I know we were gonna have discussions on potential roles of committees, etc. I don't know what the process is there.
I think
Member Hernandez, thank you for the comment and the question. The information items are generally items where we are attempting to provide meaningful information to the committee and or the board, but they're not items for which there is discussion. So for the JPA item at the last meeting, staff received direction to start the process of evaluating the joint powers agreement, looking at the roles and responsibilities of the committees and things. And right in that time, we had the transition between the interim executive director leaving and the new executive director coming on board. So your staff would like an opportunity to flesh that out with our new executive director if we could, and then we'll provide that information back for the board.
any other further questions? Make public comment? Any public comment on this agenda item? Anything online? Okay, I don't think we have to take any action. There's no direction. All right, so we're moving on to Executive Director report.
Thank you, board members. I did not provide a written report, but I can provide verbal report. Just overall 1 week into the job, so kind of getting up to speed on everything quickly with the committee meetings last week and today with you. I've been meeting one-on-one with board members and scheduling one-on-one meetings with our agency staff, so MFC committee members, as well as TAC members, public works directors, as well as partner agencies like STAN, RTA, and SJRC, and at the MLOC committee. So I'm trying to reach out as far and wide as I can, just kind of over the next couple months, at least touch base with, our key stakeholders, just for information gathering and relationship building, and to understand what everybody's doing and priorities and how we fit into that. I've attended a couple events, City of Ceres State of the City address, so that was really good to kind of understand what Ceres is up to and what their priorities are, and a lot of economic development going on in that city, so that's great. I attended the SJRC board meeting. Thank you, Mayor Zuellen, for inviting me and providing me the opportunity to provide that update. So I look forward to meeting with their director and discussing kind of their plans and how we can start coordinating with them on their future expansion plans and moving that forward for our region. Again, just trying to identify what our priorities are right now, and immediate needs are obviously continuing to move a lot of these critical items forward, making sure we continue just meeting our mandated functions, meeting key deadlines, making sure we're not at risk of losing any funding. So those are, just making sure the wheels stay on the bus. Is that, I think, the correct analogy? A couple other key items on staffing and recruitment, as you mentioned, we do have the recruitment out for our finance director, which is absolutely critical. So we have CPSHR that the board has hired to help with that process. I believe we have a meeting this week to get an update on that. So we will provide an update at the next board meeting. I believe we've had a number of qualified applications, but I haven't reviewed them myself. And then same with the planning director position. So those are two kind of key positions and hires that we're trying to move forward as quickly as possible. And then the classification and compensation, I know and where there has been, a lot of work done to try to identify those classification and salary ranges. We brought that to the Management Finance Committee last week, who had a number of questions and concerns that I couldn't answer at that time, and we didn't have the staff available to answer those questions, so we tabled that item, and I'd just like an opportunity to go back with them. They developed a subcommittee of representatives from the City of Modesto, Stanislaus County, and Riverbank. So I'll look to go back and work with that subcommittee on how to move that item forward and bring it back to the board. And I believe one other key update is we did Caltrans Internal Audits Office did an incurred cost audit. Just now reviewing that and received that last week, which will have some ramifications on our budget and fiscal impacts as well as internal processes. They had a number of findings. So we have 60 days to work with Caltrans on a corrective action plan. So I've reached out to the district and headquarters to meet with them to identify kind of actions moving forward and how we address the concerns. And so I will probably bringing that back as an item in some manner. And we did receive legislative updates from our lobbyist, Gus Corey, on the state legislative updates, which you've been receiving. So I don't know if there's anything quite significant. I will just summarize the short version that Gus Corey provided me on the state legislative updates, that revenues may be up from the time that May revise comes around. As we know, the governor had put out a significant shortfall. However, that outlook may change when the May revise comes around. Cap and invest auctions are down, which in fact affect the TIRCP funding and LC top funding quite a bit by about 40%. Lori Wilson has talked about alternatives to the road user charge program to replace the gas tax. There's obviously discussions of SB 375 reform, which impact us significantly in our RTP and SCS processes. And then other potential bills that he wanted to point out in the summary that you'll get for the board packet is AB 2168 and SB 1423, because those have significant impacts on our STIP program. So some things to watch that he has highlighted for us to continue to watch. And then federal legislative updates. There's a number of updates here, but most relevant, I believe, for us, and Jose Luis can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we submitted any community-directed spending, i.e. earmark requests, right?
StanCog did not, but we supported a request from the city of Patterson and a request from Stan RTA. They're two different pots. They do not compete against each other, and I can provide more details.
So updates on those, that the House will be doing selections and we'll be releasing those on April 17th. And then for the community directed spending from the Senate, the timeline on that uh, is, trying to find that here, in April, yeah, that will be announced. And then this is federal reauthorization year, so that's kind of the big ticket item for the COG to watch, and that's up in September. So that'll be kind of our biggest issue that we'll be concerned with. Really.
Thank you, Amber. This is your first meeting, your executive meeting. Thank you for being here.
Can I just add, the Regional Policy Council is going in September. We do have a travel policy now, but before Amber would, along with Rosa Scuti and Braden, a member, and myself, and I think that the board needs to sign off on that. We need to have that discussion. I know that there's a budget, but there's an expectation we're going to participate. We didn't participate last year. That was easy, but just because of the chaos. But this again is the spiral that I'm worried about, because Stanislaus County's priorities are not being pushed, for lack of a better word.
Vito. Any questions for Amber?
Could we, it looks like Jean will introduce the finance consulting item, but can we add in there the update about the hiring? I think it'll be helpful for the conversation.
All right, any others?
I just would like to formally welcome Amber to our group, and we look forward to working with you in the future. And I would like to invite everybody to the Modesto State of the City on Thursday, April 16th. Doors open at 4:30 p.m. and the program will begin promptly at 5:30 p.m. And I can almost guarantee you you will be out, I'm going to say 45 minutes or less. So that's at the State Theater, Thursday, April 16th. Would love to have everyone there, open to the public and no cost.
Thank you, Mayor. We know you start on time, so if you're late, might be looking for a seat. Okay.
Well, I'll add mine too, because I will be there, Mayor Swallen, but mine is April 30th. Basically the same details, 5 o'clock, 5:30-ish, and be out by 6.
Right. We just kind of rolled into member reports. Any others? All right, seeing none, we're adjourned.
Not that last minute report.
Yeah, that was good. Absolutely.